For me as a Finn, Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine not only reminds me of our past, but is directly linked to the security of the part of the world where I live. On the other hand, there is aggression and total disregard for civilian life, and an attempt to undermine the fundamental principles on which the international order is based. On the other hand, there's a bastion of freedom that is defending its right to exist and to make its own choices. The battle for what consequences we will draw from this aggression is not yet over. Recently, there's been serious attempts at diplomatic solutions of the war on the initiative of the United States. There are no perfect solutions to wars. At the same time, we know that any decision made in these matters will have far-reaching consequences in Ukraine and beyond. There can hardly be a stronger unifying interest among the UN's broad membership than our opposition to the wars of conquest. Aggression must not be rewarded. Accountability for the most serious international crimes must be pursued. In the Middle East, civilians in Gaza are experiencing immense suffering. The deepening humanitarian crisis has reached unbearable levels and represents a failure of the international system. At the same time, Hamas continues to hold the hostages it has taken, and many have already lost their lives. An immediate ceasefire is needed in Gaza. That has been reiterated from this podium many times today and yesterday. Humanitarian aid must be granted safe and unhindered access. The hostages must be released. I commend the efforts led by France and Saudi Arabia to advance the two-state solution. The negotiations must meet the Israeli and Palestinian security needs and Palestinian right to self-determination, its legitimate aspiration for statehood and sovereignty. The occupation that began in 1967 must end, and all permanent status issues must be resolved. Correspondingly, the countries that have not recognized Israel must do so. At the same time, the international community must support and strengthen the Palestinian Authority for it to govern the entire Palestinian territory effectively. This is the only viable option for achieving a two-state solution. A stable Palestine will also significantly benefit the security of Israel. In many parts of the world, conflicts are raging, causing immense suffering locally, instability regionally, and reverberations globally. We've witnessed particularly brutal violence in Sudan, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Haiti, Myanmar, and Mali, among others. Civilian populations continue to face famine and displacement at a large scale. And sometimes I feel that we end up looking at conflicts only that are near to us. But I think the job of the UN is to look at all of them with equal determination. I praise all those who, in good faith, continue to work for peace despite the daunting task. In June, a peace agreement was reached for the conflict in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The true test, like with all peace agreements, lies in its implementation. Does it stick? There's a humanitarian crisis of alarming proportions that compels us, all of us, to respond. Peace processes should not be transactional. They must be guided by international law. All countries and stakeholders in the region must be engaged and committed to achieve sustainable peace. The presence and involvement of the UN is essential. I would also like to stress the crucial work carried out by journalists amid conflicts and in other difficult circumstances. Attacks on members of the media are unacceptable. Media freedom is the basis for democracy. It is a prerequisite for an open society. The ability of the press to carry out its work is important for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, the composition of the UN still largely reflects the world of 1945. As the world has changed drastically, so should the decision-making at the UN. Last year, in this very hall, I argued for a reformed Security Council, a council where currently underrepresented regions would have a stronger voice through permanent seats at the table. The number of permanent members should be increased in the UN Security Council. At least there should be 2 new seats for Asia, 2 for Africa. I think I'm going to say this every year because it's the only place where I get applause. No single state should have a veto power. And if a member of the Security Council violates the UN Charter, its voting rights should be suspended. I believe that these changes at the top of the UN are necessary in order to maintain the UN's central role in international relations. At the same time, a more comprehensive reform of the UN is needed. I commend the Secretary General for his UN80 initiative, and I encourage him to take bold and ambitious action. So Finland strongly supports the UN and wants it to succeed. Therefore, we stress the need for true reform to enhance the organization's credibility, relevance, and efficiency. This will ensure that the UN can act. The UN needs to focus its efforts on its most important goals: ending and preventing wars, protecting human rights, and acting as a catalyst for sustainable development. And also, we need to get the UN back into peace mediation. I would argue that one of the reasons that we have so many wars right now is that the UN is absent from peace mediation. No other organization can offer the legitimacy comparable to that of the UN. If the UN is absent, conflicts are not resolved without it, which is not in our common interests. The UN is needed as a mediator, and the member states should support it at this endeavor. Finally, Finland is strongly engaged in the work of the UN and will remain so. Therefore, we're also standing for election to the Security Council for the term of 2029 to 2030. Should we be elected, Finland pledges to be a principled and pragmatic partner for peace. We are principled in our commitment to international law with the Charter at its core. We are pragmatic in seeking solutions that truly advance international peace and security, recognizing that progress is often incremental. At the outset of my speech, I said that each and every one of us has agency, a say how the new world order will look like. We want to be able to make our own choices and have an impact on the world around us. Nelson Mandela saw truth and reconciliation as the only hope for nations that are bitterly divided. The same applies to relations between states. We should learn from history, but always look to the future, bearing in mind that our decisions will shape it. Thank you very much.